Alright everyone, time for today's Bitchute exclusive in which we talk a little bit more about CHAZ. Now, of course, they've changed the name to CHOP, which is that they're now saying it's an Occupy protest instead of an insurrection because they didn't want the power cut off. I think that the people there realized that enough people like me were mentioning the possibility of utilizing the Insurrection Act because literally attempting to take over a chunk of your city with weapons, an armed insurrection at that point, declaring yourselves to be rebels, sets a pretty damn good legal precedent for you getting real fucked up if the police move in and start grabbing people up. I think they got nervous because they realized that, it's not going to be a thing forever. The people organizing this aren't dumb enough to think that they're actually an effective, offshoot of Seattle that's gained autonomy. They don't have enough territory, enough weapons, enough manpower, or any legal standing to be able to do this, so they're relying upon the outside world for food, which is why they're increasingly looting the surrounding areas. They're pissing off all of the local home and business owners, by the way. It's only a matter of time before someone fights back and they get real fucking bloody. Anyway, I wanted to analyze it a little bit further from the perspective of looking mainly at other people's analysis and coverage of it, which is that if you look at any of the lamestream reporting on this, it's still being called a protest. Now, if this were happening, if a right-wing group were to do this, if they were to take over several blocks of a city, effectively, cordon it off, they're guarding it with guns, they're declaring it an autonomous zone, all of these people would call it an insurrection, a rebellion, extremism, separatist fanaticism. They'd be calling them terrorists, certainly, especially if they were looting and vandalizing the general area, ripping up taxpayer-funded public edifices like parks and so forth, prying bricks out of the road, so to speak, to build their little barricades. They'd be calling them miscreants. They'd be calling them criminals. You have seen precious little such references in regards to this zone in Seattle. You've seen even less with regards to certain other violent confrontations, as like the other day in Atlanta, when the BLM mob there was rioting and burning Wendy's to the ground. CNN's news crew got roughed up by them. They didn't want them showing that because, people might get identified by the police if they're filmed, throwing rocks through the Wendy's window as it burns, and the smell of fries must have been incredible, and they all got hungry, and then they went off to get lunch, probably. That being said, CNN itself, its own news crew gets roughed up here. What do they call it? A protest. Protesters are burning Wendy's. Well, no, protesters don't burn Wendy's. Rioters burn Wendy's. Looters and vandals burn Wendy's. Protesters don't. That insinuates that it is a legitimate, orderly assembly with some degree of organization. These people literally disclaim the idea of being an organization. Antifa calls itself a non-entity now in a major gaslighting, by the way, of the U.S. public through their corporate buddies, which give them money. And, of course, they all bundle their cash through ActBlue, probably. And they declare themselves a non-entity, say they stand for stateless anarchism. How is it an organized protest? How is this a legitimate sort of thing? They're burning Wendy's to the ground right in front of you and attacking your own fucking news crew. This sort of thing happens in Seattle. It happens all the time. The number of rapes and sex assaults there has skyrocketed. People are all doped up on drugs and probably drunk, waving their guns around as though they actually know how to use them, and this for some reason is labeled a protest. But if this sort of total chaos were associated with a group that wasn't left-leaning, it would be called violent extremism. It'd be called literal domestic terrorism. It's about time we call it what it really is, though. A bunch of thuggery. It's not really terrorism, except for the local business owners. They're not actually able to stage a full-on insurrection and seize territory. A group of bikers or a group of Gadsden flag wavers could show up at any time and completely rout these people. They wouldn't even fight back, probably. You think they would actually fire a shot? I'm really hesitant to believe that they would. You could probably trap them all in there. If you had a well-organized enough group of people with proper barricades, mobile barricades mounted on vehicles, you could probably lock them into the area, unilaterally cut the power to it, and starve them out. It'd be funny because if a group tried to do that, they'd be the ones that would probably get called terrorists by the Seattle city government because they're such cucks. But anyway, somebody will probably try to do that regardless. Now, the CHAZ thing is bullshit. And it's funny to watch it fail, too. Like, their farm is failing. It's a pile of shit. There's no organization there. They've already downgraded themselves verbally from... They're trying to gaslight again. We're not an insurrection. We're an occupied protest. We're just protesters occupying an area of the city. No, we're not rebels or anything. Well, then, okay, so you're establishing that you're still part of the United States, correct? You're no longer an autonomous zone. You've dissolved your CHAZ after less than a week. Okay, well then, if you're subject to these laws and you're part of the United States and you're ripping apart taxpayer-funded edifices, I would think that's a problem. I think that's criminal behavior. Why doesn't the Seattle mayor do anything about this? It's because she's a cuck. It's because she agrees with them. She thinks it's wonderful. It probably looks at it as a tourism opportunity. They'll probably try to rebrand it like Haight-Ashbury or something. Oh, this was where in 2020 all of the people protested against evil orange Drumpfler, and every year they'll have an effigy in the middle of the park, which they'll convert into a community garden probably, and they'll burn like a Donald Trump effigy every year in remembrance of the glorious revolution of 2020. That's what these morons do. Meanwhile, of course, the cries of all the people suffering because they happen to live within a few blocks of this excrement-coated area filled with vandalism and rape, of course, they'll go unheard. Well, they'll go heard when all the taxpayers leave these idiot cities and start moving out to other areas. What they should do, all the suburban and small-town areas within the metros of these large cities should vote to leave. They should vote to incorporate themselves separately so they can maintain better policing and better community standards. Let the inner cities goddamn wither. Let these little city-states shrink up to the point where they're goddamn useless as anything other than commercial centers and industrial centers on the coasts, of course. And then let them guard themselves. Let them allocate their resources. Let them be business-based. They're not the same as the suburbs anyway. A suburban zone shouldn't be governed the same way as a bunch of tenements. It's less efficient if you bundle these things together anyway. You should split apart. We don't need to balkanize the U.S. We need to balkanize our cities. I think in some cases this sort of thing has actually effectively been done. Seems to usually work. There's probably a reason for that. That's about all. Peace out.